I know it's Mary Long here with Plein Air Painters Chicago, and we're here today with Timothy Powers Wilson, who's we found. I happened to be in Maine a couple weeks ago, and we walked into this gallery, and I was blown away by the painting that was on the wall, the one that you're supposed to see, and it was just an amazing painting. Which I hope that maybe Tim will give us an opportunity to see some of the paintings in his show. But as we looked around at the show, we saw that they were based in plein air, and that Tim's work has been in plein air, and he created a relationship to paint the coastlines of Maine. A few weeks ago, we had another guest with us talking about painting the prairies of Illinois, someone else who had created a residency for his plein air paintings. And when I read about Tim, I just called him up and he answered the phone, and here he is tonight. So Tim, welcome, and thank you for participating with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We're just we just want to know about you. We thought this may go as much as an hour, but whatever the time takes. And we have people here who are mainly plein air painters who just want to learn about other plein air painters, about your process, your background, all those kinds of things. And so, as I mentioned to you, those are some of the things that I thought maybe we could talk about.
Absolutely.
Great. So let me just I'm going to spotlight you here and have you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in art, and just how you've gotten to where you are right now.
Yeah. So I grew up in Maine, and so I think that's kind of how I got my affinity. I did have an upbringing on kind of an old rural farmhouse style thing, very much akin to an Andrew Wyeth element. Maybe not quite as picturesque, but it really, I think it instilled something in me about taking my time to focus on being able to be doing drawings and stuff around the house and the barnyard and everything. I went to school at the Rhode Island School of Design for illustration, and when I was there, I majored in what was kind of, I thought I was going to be doing graphic design and concept art for video games and movies and things like that. And it was all, interestingly enough, it was the advent of like Photoshop and computer everything coming into vogue. And so we were taught a lot of hand skills, a lot of rendering, how to be doing certain painting techniques with gouache and watercolor and things, but everything ended up kind of segueing into the computer. It's like, oh, we don't have time to finish it because there's a deadline, so just scan it and finish it in Photoshop. And I realized kind of after a couple of years of that I was really frustrated with it, because I really was growing to respond to the tactility of what the paint was, and I would kind of get lost in the details of, I remember I had to do a comic book cover, and I was just getting lost doing these sketches of my hand, because the hand was going to be an integral part of the cover, and I just remember finding an obsession with that and not even caring about what the end product was, and realizing that maybe illustration wasn't the best thing for me to do. So my last year there, I started to do a private study for oil painting, and from there on, I mean, when I graduated, I actually got a job doing graphic design, which interestingly was kind of on the computer. But whenever I was using my stylus, I was taping watercolor paper down so I could feel like a texture of an actual thing. And I just eventually, I remember after a few years of doing that and my own work, which really wasn't landscape based or plein air or anything, I was just so fed up of staring at a computer screen and being in my studio, in my windowless studio, that I realized that I just needed to be outside, because that's what most of my childhood was like. And I've always been an outdoorsy person and a runner and all these other things. And so I remember just taking like a tabletop easel and bringing it out to the ocean and just painting there. And it just kind of like really reinvigorated everything for me, because not only the one thing that I learned at school, at Rhode Island School of Design, was how to be productive. And like, when you're not productive, you are therein not not being a good artist. And so I couldn't allow myself the time to just, exist and observe and go for that mid-afternoon walk, because I had to tie myself to the easel or something. And so being able to do the work while I'm enjoying the ambiance of nature and interacting with everything in the outdoor world was really invigorating for me, and kind of changed a lot of my approach. And I remember, during my schooling, we did a lot of figure work, and it was all figure drawing. And every day there was a lot of gesture poses, and you really learn how to get the correct anatomy from the figure, so that way you can pull things from your head later when you want to do your own work. And I've really been trying to approach the landscape the same way, where I need to learn a vocabulary. So I'm trying to go out throughout all the different weather, whether even if it's uncomfortable or not, if it's hot, sticky, rainy, freezing, it's worth it just to kind of get this physical memory that you then can bring back to the studio. And at some point you can, elicit it from your mind, because you had that experience of going out and the muscle memory of setting up, and, the smell of things. And you've had this beautiful experience, rather than sitting at your desk trying to think about what something might feel like, or what, anything might be. And so it's really, that was kind of the beginning of my landscape approach.
And so how did it all evolve for you, that now it seems like your outdoor painting is now sort of more important for you?
It is in many ways. And kind of like we touched on a little earlier before we went live, I mean, I've had a lot of interest in things, music and writing and things that I kind of put on pause, to focus, because I get very passionate and obsessive about certain things. And I feel like there's always so much to learn about the landscape painting, and there's just only so much time. And so, one thing kind of skirts into another, and my approach varies a lot with my painting, and kind of reacting to what the canvas is or what the idea is in my mind. And I have definitely understood the landscape painting as the forefront currently of my career, certainly, but I actually am really excited to be getting back into doing a lot more kind of figurative investigations, and just playing a lot more with texture and things, and not worrying about what it might look like, which is kind of what this show was beginning to explore, a lot of that stuff.
Well, your landscapes, and I hope that let's look at some, but your landscapes that are, I would almost call abstract landscapes, are amazing to me. But they're clearly landscapes, but they're so expressive. And
that's what I was trying to play with that. So the expressiveness was due to, and I'll be very honest. So I, at the beginning of the spring, so during the pandemic, a lot of things happened, and this project that I was doing with the Maine Coast Heritage Trust, where I was painting at the preserves and staying in various locations, was kind of paused for a while. And I was doing carpentry full-time, so renovating an old farmhouse. And so a lot of my time, it was interesting after 8 or 9 years to finally have the day job, which kept me from the studio. And it's a give and take. It was interesting, I wasn't spending the time, but also it was really unique to get a paycheck every 2 weeks for the amount of effort I put into something. And that blew my mind. I was like, oh, I can work 40 hours and then get paid immediately for this thing. It's amazing. It's so I try not to get greedy with it, but I enjoyed it a lot. But because of that, I wasn't able to do all the painting that I really wanted to do. And it was just an amazing coincidence of things. But I found a studio I was going to be moving into at the end of the winter, the beginning of the spring, and it's a much larger space, so I could make all the work for this show. And as I was moving, I got a neck injury when I was at work, and I couldn't use my dominant hand for about 3 months. So I couldn't even paint until midsummer, and then had to fill that entire gallery space with things that needed to be painted. And I really wanted to follow through on what the commitment was, because I had enjoyed what the experience, because I had done so many different studies And throughout the pandemic and things, I had done little tiny sales. I had a show in Manhattan and had a couple online things. But it was just interesting because I was also really excited about exploring with larger scale, just a different vocabulary and tool usage. I used a lot of ink brayers and squeegees and things, which I feel kind of helped me get my energy more directly into the canvas in a different way that the brush might not have had. And so I've been exploring that on a smaller scale. And so it was really exciting to put that into work, and have there be kind of a somewhat of a pressure, which was exciting for me. And what was important was having had all of the experiences painting on location for all of these places and done the studies. And because of that, I could kind of be in the studio and see something on the canvas and be able to kind of react to it and remember, oh yeah, here is this experience that I had. I could pull up the study, or I could just kind of think of something and be able to play with that. And one thing that it's inwardly like I know I have the ability that I can render. I was taught very straightforward to do certain things, and my girlfriend actually goes to an atelier in New York called the Grand Central Atelier. She teaches there now, and it's very much a focus, like you do 40-hour portrait in a pencil. It's very direct, and I can do things like that. But I also feel like that can isolate a lot of viewers. And what I enjoy about what painting can be is you can kind of open up the readership a little bit. So in making things a bit more abstract, people know it's a landscape. They know what certain colors might mean, what the atmosphere might be, what might be a tree or something. But if they've never seen the Maine landscape, I don't want them to feel isolated from it. So they can kind of bring their own experience to it and be like, oh yeah, I know, I can understand what this might feel like, and maybe what might be a reflection of a mountain to some people might be a stream bed, or something to someone else. And it was really exciting to be able to kind of move into a bit more of that abstraction, specifically with this show.
So Tim, back up just a bit and talk about your relationship to create the Maine coastline.
Yeah, so they the Maine Coast Heritage Trust is the conservation that I was working with for this project, and they were familiar with the work that I had been doing. I think just through social media, or Maine ultimately is a very small community of people, but they contacted me asking me to do an interview with them because they were having their 50th anniversary. And I thought something that could be really invigorating would be to put on some sort of project, turn into a residency and this longer thing, because I wanted to do more than just offer an interview of someone who's inspired by the landscape. I wanted to show people that there's more that you can do than just hiking and just bird watching, or just obviously really appreciating the landscape, but you can here's another activity. And I wanted to be able to broaden their readership a little bit. And so I mentioned doing what if I did a thing where I'll essentially be an artist in residence, and I'll visit these preserves, and they have a few cabins that I was able to stay in, and I camped out a few times, and kayaked out to islands and things, and just kind of made a little bit of an adventure out of it, and made a bit of a story for it, and they love that idea, because what they're about is preserving lands for people to do those kinds of things, and being able to have someone who I was able to describe to them, not only does what you do make me inspired, but this is what happens when I am inspired from your efforts. And so it was a great kind of agreement that we each is a mutual understanding of how we both affect the other person in a way, or the other aspect of what we do.
So you took those studies then and things that you did there, and then you created these larger pieces. They inspired you to do the larger pieces that are now in your show.
Yeah, and a lot of times there were a few pieces there that I had started on location that were larger. Other ones I had done had previously sold. But yeah, uh, it's interesting too, because with what my mind will do when I'm painting is I think of a certain thing and how directly I want it to be, and then I'll suddenly see an element or not know what to do, and I like to be able to react to what is on the canvas. And so it was nice to work on that larger scale and realize that, you know, basically whatever I do, it's I was pulling from all of the studies that I was doing and trying to incorporate certain things. And yeah, my process was going out, making there were a bit more detailed studies that are here and there, and some things I didn't really want to show because it's a weird thing to kind of want, you know, have something up for sale that was really just like a 3-second color swash because the light changed, or, you know, little notes to myself. So I use those things a lot more than my actual, you know, studies that are a bit more formal. But it was just really great to be able to have a chance to embellish on what my experiences were, and kind of, you know, make a bit more textured atmosphere.
Well, we're already getting requests to see some of your art, so I'm wondering if you can go ahead and share your screen and show us.
Yeah.
You know, if you want, you can start backward, you know, as far back as you want, and show us some of your art that you've done, and
Yeah.
but also then related to these. This would be great.
So I just put together a couple images. I mentioned to Mary I was a bit late getting here today, and I don't know how fully people can see things. But let's see here. So this is what I was doing before, was kind of figurative work. I would render things like the figure down below is a self-portrait, and I would kind of do passes, and I was starting to think about how to obscure figures. And so when I would go back with working with the model, if they changed, I would kind of, you know, affect my brushstrokes to also show that change. So these are kind of some abstractions that were plein air studies from a few years ago. The bottom one here, I think this was like 32 by 60 or something. It was a large painting I was doing out in Maine in a field a few miles from my house. So I'd set it up and kind of, you know, there was much more rendered elements to it. And then I brought it back to the studio and realized that it didn't really feel like, you know, the winter storm that I was looking at. And so I just took enamel paints and stumbled things around and made things a bit more vague. And I feel like I got a bit more of an atmosphere and some sort of emotionality from that. And that was kind of, you know, for a while I've been experimenting with that. And at the same time, you know, I was doing things like this, like I was fracturing a self-portrait. So I was looking at a broken mirror to do a self-portrait sketch and thinking about how I can make something relatable, but also it's not directly of me. It could be, you can see the brushstroke, you can see, you know, the painting elements, but it's not isolating anyone who hasn't been familiar with what I look like, because I'm not, you know, so effectively rendered in a way. So you can see these 3 paintings.
Yes.
So that was just what I was describing about how, you know, starting to realize, even when I was doing figure work years ago, I was appreciating making these a bit more vague through rendering styles. And then these are some older landscapes that I just took from my catalog from years ago, so don't mind the prices. But thinking about texture, I was using asphaltum, which is a roofing thing. And then this was the winter painting as well.
What do you mean you're using a roofing thing?
Yeah, so asphaltum is a really rich, beautiful brown pigment that they use for both on the roads and for a roofing tar to keep the elements from coming in. And painters, I think like Joshua Reynolds and some other portrait painters of the 1800s, they used it, but it's very volatile and starts to melt after years and years in certain heats. So I stopped using that, but I was really intrigued about the texture of things from a while ago. And so I feel like, you know, this was one of the paintings in the show that was very flat painting, but using kind of that texture to recreate something and reacting to what was originally a study that I had done. And this is a 4-foot square painting, but at this point, you know, it recalled to me a feeling of being kind of warm in the winter and this vast kind of tundra scene, but it could be a lot of different things. There could be mountains in the background. It could be a close up of an oceanscape. It could be some sort of frozen stream, and I just liked having basically abstracting it down to shapes and composition with that. And the same thing with something like this was just pretty much just all pure color and thinking about scumbling texture on those things. But these colors and everything I was painting this the same time as I was painting, this was a study I had done on location overlooking the cliffs, kind of a very cold day. But yeah, I managed to, this was a 3-foot square painting that wasn't in the show, but it was something that I had done on location. And so, yeah, this show is kind of trying to combine both elements of what these studies were. This is a small study, and this was kind of an unresolved study at sunset of just kind of an empty bare tree. And then this was kind of a really quick study as the moon was coming up. And this is about 8 inches square, and really trying to think about what the emotion was at that moment, and how to make that more large scale, because I also, this was a time lapse of sunset on an island that I was at, and combining all those things together for a larger composition, I felt just adds a bit more universality to something like this. This was a larger painting that was there that is distilled down to some colors and shapes, and for me, I can read a lot of things into it. Like there's this kind of swooping shape coming from the left to the right in the background there, this was an island and that was kind of a distant peninsula jutting out, and so I know what these things are, but trying to get more energy out of it and just incorporating different studies, I could make a bit more of an imaginative landscape with things.
So a couple of thoughts or questions for you. First, a thought that one of the things I did love when I was there was seeing that some of your paintings were actually multiple paintings, like you just showed the 3.
Yeah.
That was, you had a couple.
Like this was, just like something like this where I'm out, I had kayaked out to an island, so I can only have small panels. And just because of what the timing was and everything, I wanted to be able to capture things, and it didn't make sense to switch off of the panel for a different painting, because ultimately these are just field notes and to serve the purpose of informing the paintings that I'm doing. And so whatever way possible to keep the notes, and have them be informative. So all this was part of the scenes that did affect this painting ultimately. The bottom painting here kind of has that peninsula that I remember, and just incorporating those things was important to me.
And Tim, yeah. What are you using for tools to create these brushes?
Yeah, usually I'm on location. I'm using brushes, a lot of palette knife, and when I do the larger paintings, I'll use a squeegee, or I use an ink roller to put paintings on. This was kind of a small to medium sized painting. I think it was like 16 by 30 or something. Or 16 by 24. And so that was, you can see the brush strokes and things, but I really actually like, what I've been realizing with my process is paintings can either be very quick or they can be layered. And I really like the layers where rather than spending a lot of time on each layer, I like putting the base coat down and then, putting this kind of watery area, I just threw some pigment on and squeegeed it, and really, I think it had the effect of casting some shadows and reflections and texture that I would not have gotten with just using the brush to painstakingly render what certain things were. And so it's kind of using an immediacy where that's what I would do in the field in a way, because the light is changing and you only have so much time, you need to figure out an efficiency to your materials, and the brush can certainly do all things, but you might not have the time to do it all. And so you really need to find a way to kind of, jet set yourself and just accomplish what you can. And so if I do spend, multiple passes on paintings, I actually do really quick layers. And that way I feel I keep that kind of freshness to things.
So one question I have is related to 16 by 24 in all that wind by the ocean. How do you deal with the wind? That's
It can be difficult. So I have an example. This is just a small study. And I got a really thick painting with this, but I use this easel a lot, which is a Strata easel. And I have a really heavy duty tripod. And I feel like nowadays everything is lighter and for the sake of ease of, not having to have things around. But when you're going to paint in the wind, yeah, I love this solid heavy tripod, and I'll lay it down. I have a baggie that I put some stones in when I'm out at places. I also have I don't think I have an image of it. I only have a few things here, but I have a quick setup tent that I use. It's basically used as like a privacy tent for either you're changing or showering or like a toiletry kind of thing when you're camping. And it goes up in a few seconds, and I just set that up and I put stones on the outside and paint in that. So that way, if it's snowing or raining, I still get a view of the scenery. And it just takes about 30 seconds to set up. And in most cases that can block the wind, but it can be difficult. I definitely have to hunker behind the stones sometimes. And it's all about, the larger that you paint, I found, the closer to the ground you need to have the easel. And so I'll also tilt things and just lean things against the location as well. So the plein air studies that are smaller, like this one, are easy if it's windy and stormy out, but the larger you get, I feel the lower to the ground you need to do it, just because of the gravity of it all.
And many of these paintings are fairly, if not toneless, very minimal pigments. Is that purposeful?
It is. I mean, I'm definitely, color is difficult for me in many ways. And it can be a lot to think about. And so if I keep a very simplified palette, things are more harmonious in a way. You can just think about the tonality of things and how to, raise things out and lessen things. And I definitely work a lot from midtones and then kind of add some darks and then add some brights from that. And I do find that I enjoy mixing really exciting like shadow tones, or if I'm going to do a really washy underpainting, I'll mix like a dioxazine purple with Indian yellow to get a kind of crazy thing. And then I'll go with my muted umbers and siennas and stuff. But from that kind of vibrant, shadows that I'll make, it just adds a little bit of a excitement to it. But otherwise, my colors are a very muted kind of earth palette, just because it's simpler in a lot of ways. And I found too that, as all painting on location, it certainly seems very glamorous, but then you realize, oh, well, I've got to paint a little bit in the shade because it's so bright out, and then my pupils are dilating looking at this bright scene, and then back in my dark canvas and nothing's bright, and then you turn the painting into the light, or even painting in the light and everything's this kind of garish colors, and it can be so frustrating. And so I find that if you don't even have the options of colors to be garish, you're not going to have garish colors. So when you get the really strong cadmiums and things, they can be amazing, but it can be really frustrating to use them both efficiently and adapt them to the scene, I found. And so those colors I usually keep for the studio, and I really love using colors in the studio, but it just takes time to set things
So
up.
someone asked, so then how do you handle the summer when there's green all around?
Interestingly enough, this summer I was in the Hudson Valley for a little bit, and I was doing I was only there for a week, but I did a lot of sunsets from a vista with the Grand Chinchilla Atelier. And so I was the greens were intense. There was multiple greens, and it was just, at first I really tried to keep a low chroma, and I was just mixing the greens with yellow ochre and like an ivory black or something. But then I decided to use like an earth green, and I brought out a sap green and a Courbet green and a Viridian, and it was enjoyable. It was really enjoyable. And I also, that's a very selective time I would use those, but also I did bring out a cadmium yellow, and I was trying to mix things up a lot. And so within that, I'm all for using whatever pigments are possible. And it's just thinking about usually when I am most inspired, it happens to be during the most dire of weather when you really don't have time to think about, what you're going to be doing. You just need to swallow something on there. And so painting in the summer when it was beautiful and warm out, it was it was a good experience to actually be able to take my time a little bit more. But ironically, I ended up kind of, it was all a bit too rendered. So I just kind of like took an ink roller and my palette knife and kind of like blurred things a little bit from these paintings, just to get a concept of what the expanse was. This is just a small little 6x12 or something. But yeah, the greens can be very intense, and I will be honest, I do prefer to paint on overcast days because the light stays very consistent and things are a bit more palatable in my mind.
Sure. And, somebody's also asking about what kind of a medium do you use? Do you use any?
I use it can be Gallicator and paint thinner. I kind of mix my own. It's basically Gallicator. I'll use stand oil, a little bit of Damara varnish, and some Venice turpentine, and mineral spirits, and that's basically what Gallicator is. So you get a little bit of gloss, and the varnish, adds the gloss and also speeds some drying time and adds a little bit of tack to it. And when I am going to do a second pass on a painting, I will use retouch varnish because I feel like that it sets up really quickly and allows you to kind of get that drag with the brush. Whenever I've tried using just Gallicator mineral spirits to oil out a painting or something, it doesn't really work the way that I want to. But I like to use as much pigment as possible. I realized before I was painting with a lot of medium, almost more so than pigment sometimes, and it would make for kind of a strange painting in the end. And it's now that I've been able to kind of embrace using the palette knife to kind of get rid of paint and smear things around, I find I like a bit more pigment on the canvas to deal with.
Are you toning your canvases?
Yeah, most of my canvases are toned. Like you see here, it's kind of got this golden brown. And I'll tone them different. Some will be lighter than others. I find that it is helpful to have just a little bit, because there's just something, when I do approach a canvas and I think I've done a really interesting job with something, but then I realize it's just pure white on aspects of it. It's just, it makes it more difficult. And so having that kind of mid-tone of the ground to work with is great. And also in terms of the limited palette, if you're painting with this kind of golden brown and you do scumble a little ivory white with black mixed in it, you get kind of a great blue in a way. And so you're able to find these little shortcuts that, like I said before, everything kind of helps when you're thinking about the efficiency and just trying to get the information before the scene changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think toning your canvas is a fun way to kind of explore, different things. And if you're going to tone it red, that could be great. If you're going to paint on a really green day, it's going to be really summery. If you already have that red tone canvas, things are going to pop a little bit more, or they're going to be able to complement a little bit. And you will have to do, if you can have a few canvases toned and ready to go for whatever environment you're going into, you can kind of help yourself get off on a good foot that way, I think.
Yeah, these are wonderful. How long do you spend on a painting?
So this canvas was probably, it was 2 passes. The first pass was about 10 minutes. The second pass was about 5 minutes, 2 different days. But something, if I'm looking at, this is going to be in a show I've got coming up. There's so much glare on this. This was a few different paintings that I ended up just doing glazes and things on. It started as a plein air painting. It's 18 by 30 something. And that took me, weeks, but I wasn't working on it every day. It was kind of like, kind of one of the first things we were talking about was, treating your paintings as friends. I try to approach them every day, let them know that they're loved. So I didn't know what to do with it, but I was like, here's a layer of Van Dyke brown, moving on to the next painting, and I'll see what happens with that. And then I'll come back to you in a few days. I like to be able to develop things that way. That was kind of what happened with this. This was a winter scene. There was a plein air sketch, a larger thing that it's completely different. And it's actually inverted. It was upside, I had the painting the other way around and I flipped it 180 degrees because I liked, where this is essentially reading as maybe snow now. This was the sky before, and I just liked this better as the ground. So then I waited for things to dry, scumbled some things, did some glazes, and eventually came up with some sort of atmosphere where, perhaps these are trees over here. There's different lighting effects happening, but the studio paintings can be more labored. But in terms of the plein air studies, yeah, this was ultimately ended up being 15 minutes, but it took 2 different days. And the time spent getting out there, so driving, 15-minute walk, setting up, putting the paints out, infinitely more, but so I can add that into it, so maybe there's 3 hours for the painting. Each of these paintings, I could be reading and say, this one took me 35 years to get to this point or
Well,
something.
we were just
Yeah.
laughing about that, because that is often the question about how long you've been painting. It's like,
Yeah.
right, I mean, on this painting or forever, so.
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's there is, it's unique talking to you guys about, because we're all plein air painters, there's something to be said about, we know that doing studies to capture things, there needs to be an efficiency, but also, I'll bring a couple of canvases out and paint them at the same location because I know the light's going to change, and I'll spend a lot of time just like slowly pacing myself, trying to capture some elements. And I feel like there's something in today's society, specifically, with all our social media, that's all about brevity. Everything is a quick sketch, oh, I just made this quick, thing, and here's this, when really, I think a lot of things take a lot longer. If someone said that they made oh, I just whipped this casserole off in 10 minutes, I'd be a little bit suspect. It actually takes a long time to make a casserole. So don't worry, it's okay to spend a lot of time on a painting. And I feel like, it's okay to have quick sketches and quick paintings, but it's also okay to be able to really focus in. And, I've likened it to, if everyone's making sketches and not making fully resolved paintings, where that would be the same as if Beethoven just wrote jingles the entire career and didn't make a symphony. You've got to kind of, one thing affects the other. And so although some sketches may be quicker, just because this took me this long, I actually tried making a bigger painting of this, and I spent hours and hours trying to figure out how to make it feel a certain way, and I couldn't get it. I think I approached it numerous different sessions over a couple of days to do a larger version, and yeah, and the hours didn't really produce anything in a proper way. So I need to find another way to, perhaps inform a painting based off of this study. But yeah, I used to enjoy thinking that everything could happen really, really quickly, but I enjoy the concept now of being able to spend time with something as well.
And Tim, when you and I were just talking before others joined us, we were talking a little bit about the meaning in paintings and sort of the spirituality that comes along with it. And you were talking about George Ennis, and what's your sense of all that? And what do you sort of assign meaning or find meaning in creating your paintings?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the plein air painting, like I mentioned at the start of this, I was frustrated in my studio, didn't know what to do. And so I just took an easel, went outside and painted. And that was my first landscape. And it really opened my eyes. And I feel like that was a therapy in a way. It has become like a meditation for me, where I would, make sure that I was doing a painting a day outside just to be able to relax. And, it helps me, there's a serenity, and I'm usually by the ocean. So I hear this crashing waves, and it really helps me focus on other thoughts that might, come out into the paintings or later on in the studio. And there is kind of a holistic, spiritualness that I do feel when I am alone in a location that's very important to me, that I do try to bring into some sort of a final resolve with it. And yeah, so I do feel a lot of different kind of emotions that nature can heal. And that was really important, during the pandemic, when we were all cooped up. It was really great to have it was my job in a way to actually go out to these preserves and paint. And so that gave me a lot of joy that I don't think that I would have gotten if I didn't have an actual excuse to leave the house. And I knew that I could go to a place where I didn't have to worry about coronavirus or anything, because there's nobody there. And, it was a very healing element for me.
Mm-hmm. I think we felt that too. We, as I mentioned to you, had critiques every week during the lockdown, and I think it made a lot of difference for people being
Yeah,
able to go out and paint.
yeah.
Um, Tell us a little bit about sort of what's next for you, and where are you taking all this?
So what's next is I'm actually dropping off paintings at a show in Boston tomorrow. And then I'm going to England for a residency in a week. I'll be there until December. And I'm excited to be able to experience that landscape. But basically, over the next year, I'm going to be living in a farmhouse up north in Maine and doing some renovation work to it. But it's just an excuse for me to kind of be there and exist in this place. A friend of mine purchased this building, and he wants to convert it into an artist residency. And so he asked for my input on it, and he knew that I had been doing. My family goes back a couple generations of woodworkers and cabinet makers and stuff, and so he asked for my aesthetic on functionality and also how much to preserve. And so basically, I'm going to be there. And when I first went into this place, it very much was like an Andrew Wyeth house, and just kind of going along with the spirituality of it. I mean, opening up the barn door in this place that was kind of forgotten, but had so much energy with different animals in it for so many years. There's this great aura that you kind of feel going into it, and I really wanted to capture that. So I'm going to be doing a lot of paintings there. And interestingly enough, there's a back door to this barn that looks onto this beautiful field, and it's perfect north light. And so I was doing some self-portraits there with the north light, and I'm envisioning kind of the same thing with the landscape. I'm going to react to what my environment is. And so I'm going to react to, well, here's this beautiful element for Northlight. I'm going to be hopefully painting figures within this and thinking about something emerging out of, I love the aspect of, the bright light hitting the exterior of barns and this dark murkiness with something positive brewing in it, and I want to play with documenting this barn, to be honest, for a while. But basically I'm going to, be trying to, I've got a couple of shows for the next summer, and I'm going to be exploring, maybe mixing the landscape in with a bit more of this kind of figure element and the actual structures of the barn and everything. But it'll be a bit of an isolating experience. It's just me up there. But I feel, like I mentioned, you kind of got to put yourself through these things. And so I know there's an end line to it all. And I certainly have outlets. So yeah, I'm just going to be doing a lot of different things, I think, over the next year.
How have you come about creating, for instance, the residency in the Cotswolds?
So that was, honestly, it's the power of manifestation. I think I was mentioning to you, Fire, like I kind of been hermited up for a while. It's weird. I was going through different things with what social media is, and when I finally get around to responding to a message, it takes me weeks, and then I get a response back in 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, this took me forever. This is just one of the things that, how do I actually paint when I'm going to do this? And so just getting overwhelmed with things like that. I used to be much better at it, but realizing that every time I go into a painting now, there's more and more rabbit holes that open up that I really want to explore and commit myself to. And that isn't to say that I haven't wanted to do all these things. And there's a gallerist that I have, I've worked with here and there, and she moved to London a few years ago. Her name is Jen Singer, and she's an online only gallery now, but she called me up because she knew about the work I was doing with the Maine Coast Heritage Trust with this project. And apparently there's a program out there that it's exclusive only to British artists, and usually it's only about a 1-week residency for them. But she talked to them and got them to confirm me for doing a 6-week residency. So I'll be the first expat over there. So it is just kind of like leaving yourself. I've had a lucky career where, like, perhaps some people here are, I'm quite good at self-sabotage and self-loathing. So like, oh, this opportunity comes up, I don't want to, no, I'm just going to pretend like I didn't read that email. And I'm just going to, just go back to what I was doing. I've done that many times. But I feel like, especially after the pandemic, it's just worth trying things. And so I was lucky that this was an acquaintance that I had made earlier, this gallerist. And so she was kind of looking out for me and saw this opportunity. But otherwise, I think it's just, if you just smile and show enthusiasm towards something, people tend to react to it positively. Like specifically, since we're all plein air painters, I joke around a lot, but there are so many times when I'm out on a location somewhere and I realize that it's, private property or no trespassing or something. And sometimes if I am seen, or I get anxious at first, but if someone comes up to me and they see that like I am jovial and I'm like, oh, I loved this scene, and I'm actually like admiring it, and I'm not trying to take advantage of it. I'm documenting it because it's so beautiful. I feel like we almost have like an artist's, get out of jail free card. We have a passport. We can get to places in certain ways that other people might not have, but and I think it's because we have this passion for creation of something, and a lot of people respond positively to that. So if you're at all ever able to have some experience, and the ability to vocalize your enjoyments and giddiness to be able to work with something and create something out of it, people mostly aren't going to say, no, that sounds horrible. I would hate to have someone be inspired by this. Thank you, goodbye. Like, it's really going to mostly it's going to come out positive for you, I think.
Are you going to be posting some of your work that you're doing?
I am, yes. And this is something I've been waiting for so long. She's actually going to be kind of, I think, taking control of, some Instagram things in a way, and just like, I'll be able to give her things and she can put them out there and stuff. I'm definitely going to be posting stories and images as I go, as much as I can. Because I'm excited about the Cotswalds. Seem to be quite a beautiful area in England. I've been to Edinburgh before in Scotland, and got a taste of the Highlands. So I'm excited for some rolling hills. And
That sounds beautiful, and probably not so different from what you've been doing, some parts of it.
It isn't, and I've said to people before, that's kind of what's kept me in New England, in Maine. It's just it's as Englandish as I could guess, I think, and it'll be specifically harkening back to talking about some spirituality and George Innes and things. Like, it's one thing to be in New England, but to be in a place where there have been countless other generations of civilizations, trotting upon certain things. Like, I'm really excited to feel how it is to be there in person, rather than just kind of seeing images, and see what that kind of elicits for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd like to invite other people. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat if you have some questions for Tim.
Yeah.
And we've had a few here. One of them, the last one, was about your website. What kind of advice do you have for painters? And I for our plein air painters, partly it's related to what you were just saying, to career, and then just in terms of reaching out to organizations and things like that. Any other thoughts or advice?
So you mentioned website, but also are these two different aspects of things? Because I have found that there is a difficulty I've noticed in working with galleries and having my own website, because most galleries don't represent people anymore. You're kind of at your own whims to, if you are having a rough time, you've got to have sales you can put things on your website. And I've found that what I've been doing a lot is I'll put some studies on my website, and I'll have larger paintings and things kind of like specifically reserved for the galleries. But for getting the word out there, I mean, again, I was fortunate when I was first starting out doing much more portraiture and kind of literally darker imagery. I was approached by a gallery that had a really wonderful aesthetic with what I've been doing, and he stayed with me the whole time. And so that, helped me kind of get a foot in the door. And one thing that I will say I've been bad at is, I think it is important to have an archive of work. I'm really glad that I'm almost like, I'm sounding egotistical saying this in a way, but like, I'm glad that, work has sold in different ways. But at the same time, I kind of stuck my foot in it with a couple of different shows where I wasn't aware of what the deadline was going to be immediately, and I thought I could get certain things done, and not having work that I could just be able to use and having to make it all on the spot put me in a weird place a lot of times, where maybe I wasn't entirely comfortable about how a painting was, but then the irony of having it have to be on a wall for 2 months or something and have it be available for purchase, I constantly wish that I had a bit more work that you know, was just kind of around that was finished that I could be able to use for certain things. And um, I always kind of like, you know, hate myself every now and then for just putting things out there because I'm excited and then realizing, oh shoot, I should have kept that for this thing. And there's no need for, you know, it's okay to keep things incubated for a while. So I think it's good to have a little trove of work at your arsenal to be able to use when approaching galleries. Because if someone is interested in something, they might want work kind of immediately, and to keep them interested, you can kind of feed them a few, you know, a few hot irons, and yeah, I think that's an important thing to be able to have, definitely.
So do you sign your paintings? Some of the ones you've shown us didn't have a signature.
I signed them on the back. I don't know. It's whenever I put my signature on it, it's kind of like when you hear your own voice on the answering machine or something. I just, when I see my signature, I'm just like, oh, this is the signature is taking way too much space. And what's the? It doesn't matter. And I think that the signature is a great important part of something. It is nowadays. I think it's more a custom of tradition. It's not entirely necessary because we have such amazing photo documentation and time registrations on metadata of JPEGs and all this other stuff where you don't actually need it. But I do sign it because I think it feels important to be like, this painting is done, like check, you know, pinpoint, and you sign off on it. So I put it on the back of them a lot, the lower right hand of the back, or sometimes I'll do a little pencil on the bottom. But yeah, I don't know why I'm so weird about signatures. It's the kind of thing where I love seeing other people's signatures too on paintings. And I can't do it myself.
That's great. So what's the possibility of you showing us your studio there? Or is it all a picture behind you and not real?
This is all a facade. No, this is my desktop. I can't really do too much about it. But this studio is I can kind of twirl things around. My Portland studio, it's a mess right now because I was incubating things. It's kind of a smaller studio, and the studio that I'm moving into. So this is one aspect, and I've got another L that goes this way where I have paintings stored. Yeah, I can't. This is maybe 600 square feet, and the studio I've moved into is about 2,000 square feet. So I have much more space to be doing things, and so I just realized, you know, people say that, you know, art can't be determined by the size of, you know, your encumbrance or something, but it really, when you're stepping over paintings constantly to try to, you want to get to one, you end up stepping on 10 wet paintings to move things out of the way. I was spending most of my days reorganizing the studio just to get to the easel at times. And so, you know, I've been through many different studios. The studio that I'm in right now function is kind of my home base in many ways. I've kind of always had, you know, the landscape is a studio certainly, but I've always had somewhat of external studios. Like before I moved to this other studio, I had another space. It's just living in the city as you guys do. I'm renting this space for $300. So I'm going to keep my footprint here for as long as I can. So even though I'm not really using it at the moment, I've got things here. And, you know, I like to come here and sit and just, you know, back on the holistic element. Even if I'm not going to paint, I think it's important to sit in your space and just express some sort of energy, you know, and therein, when you want to focus and pull some crazy hours later, the energy is there for you to soak back in from the walls because you've been doing things here enough. And so I try to treat spaces like that a lot, to be honest. It might sound weird, but I do that a lot.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So a couple other quick questions. Who have been your influences? You mentioned Andrew Wyeth. Any others?
Yeah, Andrew Wyeth, George Innes, you know, obviously the Hudson Valley painters have influenced, you know, everything that a lot of people have done for plein air painting. Contemporary people, I have really loved. I look at a lot of figurative artists and landscape painters, but there's a painter, Douglas Fryer, who he kind of works, I think he's kind of what I've been adapting some things to. He works a lot with layers and looks like squeegees and stuff, but I don't think he paints too much on location, but he's got a great element of, he managed to almost get some sort of photographic realism out of it, which is really intriguing because he also still has this interesting blurring to it. But I love Antonio Lopez Garcia. His landscapes are, transformative in ways because he spends months and months, if not years, on these paintings, these gargantuan scale paintings, getting the most minute details. But even within that, I think some of his paintings were started in the 1970s and they're still being worked on, but they
What
still
is his
seem
name?
so. Antonio Lopez
Antonio.
Garcia, or
Mhm,
Garcia Lopez.
mhm.
He's really a hallmark of figurative artists, but his landscapes are truly, truly amazing. And I really appreciate that element. I can't think of too many other ways that someone can show transference of time rather than the painting that he would do, because he is painstakingly dabbing over the course of decades, but throughout that, buildings go down, so then he starts to paint out the building, and then certain windows are reframed, and so he starts to paint the reframe of the window, and suddenly this canvas is alive. It's just so much thing that you're not imagining someone just like with a little tiny brush. You're just this thing is vibrant, and so I really find that very intriguing.
And somebody asked, what music do you listen to when you're painting?
I listen to a lot of different things, but I certainly know that music gets me into a certain headspace. And so if I get into a headspace with a painting, I'll suddenly have a song on repeats or a part of a song rewinding back and for hours and hours. And so I often try to put headphones on because I don't want to, make my neighbors go crazy or anything. But I'll listen to anything from, Gregorian chant music to Brian Eno in the Roxy, whether he's doing ambient or rock music, or I'll listen to Shaka Khan or Madonna or New Order, or really anything, just whatever gets me in the headspace. I'm totally, it's all part of the process, and I'm not shy to say it.
Yeah,
And I
no,
do I've got some records behind me too. I like the act of Spotify can be overwhelming where there's so many options that sometimes I'll find myself thinking about what song I'm going to listen to and I'm not actually painting. And so if I just put a record on, I know in 20 minutes I can take a break and flip the record over and just go back, and there's limitations with what the music is too. So I try to find some analog things as well, like that, my own
yeah.
timer.
Oh, great. Tim, this has been just great. We've had many people are thanking you here for your time and your thoughts and
Well, thank
spending
you
time
guys.
with us. It's been really fun. Do you have any parting words for us?
No, aside from thank you so much for having me. And I know you mentioned, doing some trips, and I know you've got a show coming up as well. I wrote these things down, and hopefully somehow our paths can converge if I, when I'm back and get
Please,
myself over there.
anytime. Yeah, please,
Yeah.
anytime come to Chicago and come paint with us. We paint April through October, but we're doing all kinds of educational programs and things. So would love to have you. This would be great.
I would love it. But no, it was a treat for me. So thanks for letting me yammer on for so long.
No, this is great. Well, I think we're probably near the end here. It's about an hour or so, but
Yeah.
really have enjoyed it. Anybody have any other questions? I'm not seeing any other ones other than people just appreciating you. And this has been really wonderful. And it was so much fun being in Maine and just being a guy at your show. It was just terrific.
I'm glad you get to see them, because that's what I think is important, is, being able to see work in person can be, integral to the experience, thinking about the scale of things. And
And what was the name of the gallery?
Cove Street Gallery.
Coast Street Gallery. So
Yep.
I've noticed a couple other people have been out there, heading out there. So just in case, but anyways, thank you so much. And we will end here, but thanks so much, Tim.
My pleasure.
Thank
Take care, you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Also making some frames for a show I'm delivering tomorrow to Boston. So it's kind of
nice.
a busy day. And it's funny because I've been so scattered. I've got a couple different studios now that I was putting in place, and to get this opportunity, it's such a beautiful, huge barn that I could be painting in. So suddenly I have like 3 places where I'm set up for documenting things, and it's great, but it's all overwhelming. And I'm leaving for England in a week, so I can only do so much before I go. So
This
it's
is
just been a
amazing.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's wonderful. What a great time you're having, and it sounds like career. So
It was, well, I definitely took a pause on a lot of things. I mean, even before COVID, I was kind of just trying to figure out how to approach doing the things that I wanted to do, and feeling competent with a lot of stuff, and just honestly, just the rigmarole of having to, being the artist, doing your own promotion and stuff. I fell along the wayside of actually, being good at Instagram and other things. So I've been kind of in a nice little hermetic bubble for a little while, and I feel like now that I'm opening myself up to the universe a little bit more, it's nice that there's actually opportunities. You kind of, it's nice to think of the manifesting ability of that we all have.
so it sounds like you have kind of a spiritual bent too.
I do, in many ways. Yeah, not religious at all, but I do believe in kind of like, the energy exerted in things, and just, yeah, being able to make things occur. And
Yeah.
that's kind of honestly like the landscape painting is part of that too. I mean, it's, there's something very holistic and grounding about being out in the world and kind of surrounded by this grandeur. I think that George Innes was also someone who was really, he was extremely spiritual. I just kind of, enjoy the concepts of things, but he spent a lot of his time studying, it's a strange name, but it's Swedenborgism, which is kind of a spiritual practice that he did, but it's evident in his paintings. He did a lot of that. I think that the later work, when he was really tonal, he said was a lot to do with just elements of his spirituality. So it's interesting how it all kind of ties.
That sense of meaning, and for me it's really important to have
Oh, completely.
that when I can get in touch with it. I don't always, I still just paint a tree sometimes, but
that's that's all it has to be. I think sometimes it can be, when someone tries to force meaning into something, that's when it gets stifled a little bit. So it can just be a tree, and that's all it needs to be. And it's later on maybe that'll turn into something else, and the tree could lead to, a painting you want to do from that, and helps you get an idea out or something. But yeah, it doesn't have to always be this grandiose concept behind anything.
yeah, and of course we can kind of do it retrospectively too, but at the same time, I do find that there's times when I'm really much more connected than I am other times. So
Yeah,
are you a writer?
I did a lot of writing, kind of. I used to journal here and there, and my thing, I always loved kind of writing, like creative writing, like, fictional things, and just creating worlds. But I always was able to think of scenes and characters and things, but never an actual plot of, whatever. But I definitely do. I've been enjoying writing limericks and poetry, and I think of a lot of ideas when I'm out painting in locations for narratives, and just a lot of imagery and scenery comes to mind. But writing, and I used to do a lot of music when I was growing up as well. These are all things that I'm hoping to get back to at some point. But painting was certainly something that I made take the forefront, just because I realized that having a lot of pots in the fire is wonderful, but it was frustrating when I was painting but didn't get as far as I wanted to, and because I wanted to go record a song or write this thing down, and then didn't get very far with that. So I had to kind of put a couple of things on the side, to really pursue that, and not, and keeping sanity and everything like that is important. So it's good to be able to relax a little bit, and
Well, and have some other outlets as well.
oh yeah,
That's really nice.